signs in the sun, moon, and stars. Okay, more MAZZAROTH fun. Here we go. First thing that I found is directly after Venus crosses into the Silver Gate, we see some very interesting things happen. The first thing that we see is, if you see the constellation of Orion, you see this constellation of Orion. As Venus comes out of the constellation of Taurus and crosses into the constellation of Orion, this is the area of the Silver Gate here. Between these 2 points here is the Silver Gate. If you come back up, you will see that the constellation of Gemini gives you your borderline, and you'll see that this was the edge of the constellation of Taurus. It does come up and come over, but you can see how this gives you your gate. If you come through here, you'll see that the Milky Way comes just like this right through here. So what we're looking at is Venus's transition through the Silver Gate and into the constellation of Gemini. But it does not enter Gemini for 8 days. It's in the constellation of Orion for exactly 8 days. So those of you who have done your MAZZAROTH studies, you know that the constellation of Orion represents Christ, the Messiah, and Venus represents the bright and morning star, which is the Messiah, and the number 8 represents the Messiah. And we are in the Silver Gate. What we're going to do is we're going to scroll in a little closer, and we're going to look at this area of the constellation borders. Here is the borderline. Here is the entry point. We're going to look at the date. The last find that we had was at 10:11 p.m. tomorrow on August the 4th, 2020. Venus crosses into the Silver Gate, which is into the constellation of Orion. Now, depending on the position of Venus, sometimes the planet will come in higher and will actually enter into, I believe it's Auriga. Let's scroll back and see if Auriga is... nope, it's not Auriga. It must be Taurus. Must still be Taurus. Yes. So sometimes you can see here the planet Venus. Here's the ecliptic, and sometimes the planets are under the ecliptic, and sometimes they come in over the ecliptic, and sometimes they're right on the line. So depending on where they are, they enter into different constellations, and that gives us different meaning. So if it's transitioning from Taurus directly into Gemini, that tells a different story than if it's transitioning from Taurus into Orion and then into Gemini. And this has great significance right now because we're dealing with the planet Venus, and we're dealing with the constellation of Orion. And we know that the Silver Gate is at the club of Orion, and at the foot of Gemini, and at the hand of Auriga, and at the horn of Taurus. So this section right here is a high watch time. We're at the Silver Gate. And we have a sign of Messiah in the Silver Gate. And it is something that is drawing our attention. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for this borderline and count out these days so that you can see how many days this happens to be. And I found it to be exactly 8 days. So here we are on the 4th, and we're going to go ahead and go through 8 days. Here's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5, 6, 7, 8. Bingo. If we scroll in a little bit closer, we'll see that Venus is just past the line. So we can see that the meridian and Venus have now passed the line, and we are exactly 8 days later. So this has great significance to me, being a watchman who's trained in MAZZAROTH, to see Venus transition for 8 days. Reminds me of the festivals of Passover, unleavened bread, and the Feast of Tabernacles. We are always looking for 8 days. On the 8th day, there's so many signs of the number 8 in the scriptures that it calls us to wisdom. So, for those of us who are looking for the return of Messiah to sweep away his bride, this 8-day period is a great sign, because we know in Israel there are typically a 1-week period of weddings, and this could be a great sign of the 8-day wedding feast. So if we go back 8 days and look at when this entry is, it happens on the 4th, from the end of our last sign, which is at 10:11 p.m. Venus enters into the Silver Gate and spends 8 days in the constellation of Orion in the Silver Gate before entering into the constellation of Gemini that also represents Messiah. Signs in the sun, moon, and stars.